Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Geeta Sachdeva, Assistant Professor, National Institute of Technology, NIT Kurukshetra. The module which I am going to discuss is Organizational Effectiveness. The main learning objective of this module would be introductory part, difference between effectiveness and efficiencies, factors affecting organizational effectiveness, and how effectiveness can be achieved through adaptive coping style. After the completion of this module, students would be in position to understand concept, meaning of organizational effectiveness, to differentiate between organizational effectiveness and organizational efficiencies, and they will come to know the different factors about organizational effectiveness. First, we must know the concept of organizational effectiveness. The concept of organizational effectiveness has been getting substantial significance in the past few years, mainly from the social scientists. Organizational effectiveness is also termed as organizational success, growth, efficiency, productivity or profitability. These different terms are frequently used interchangeably, although there is inconsistency in these different terms. Organizational effectiveness has attained significance because of the subsequent reasons. First reason is like in the day-to-day current life, man has become more or less dependent on diverse type of organizations for the contentment of his requirements. The need satisfaction is reliant upon the organizational effectiveness. Higher the effectiveness, higher would be the satisfaction of needs derived by the men from the organization. Therefore, this concept is very significant from point of view of the society at large. Organizational effectiveness has also attained significance because it offers a precious central point for theoretical incorporation of the rising but highly diversified field of organization theory. So, what does mean by organization effectiveness? An organization is supposed to be effective if it is capable to attain its objectives inside the constraints of restricted resources, as none of the resources given by organization environment are limitless. Organizational effectiveness is a degree to which organization attain its objective with given resources and means. Organizational effective is more inclusive, that is reflected by meager good performance, productivity of members or the financial achievement of the organization. It reflects how efficiently an organization can release its obligations with respect to all of its ingredients in its interior and exterior environment. For instance, shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, government agencies and the overall public. The growth, expansion, morale, motivation and satisfaction of the members in the system combined with good image projection of the organization in the eyes of the general public account for in turn for sustained organization health, vivacity and growth, which account for organization effectiveness. Thus, organizational effectiveness reflects how well the organization is prepared to endure in modern competitive business world by successful coping, then to grow up and widen in future through inventive adaptation strategies. The concept of organizational effectiveness seems to be easy, but it is very tricky to use this concept in realistic life. It is because of this cause that organizations and the people who run them repeatedly have many aims or goals which might be in conflict with each other. Even the understanding of organizational objectives will be subject to diverse viewpoint of owners, society, employees, managers and some other groups. As it is very hard to attain a single accord on the organizational objectives, measurement of effectiveness in exact term is rendered approximately unfeasible. Next one is difference between effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness and efficiencies are usually used very intimately and interchangeably, though both these terms have very obvious and split meanings. The dissimilarity in these two terms can be explained with help of these points. Organizational effectiveness is generally referred to as the degree to which pre-arranged operational and operative objectives are attained, while the concept of efficiency symbolizes the cost and benefit rate incurred in the chase of these objectives, or in other words, efficiency is something like input and output ratio. It illustrates how much inputs are used to create certain amount of outputs. Next difference is effectiveness is a multidimensional concept which cannot be calculated by single criteria, but efficiency can be calculated by the input-output ratio. This difference is very significant to describe why some organizations are effective but extremely inefficient, or extremely efficient but ineffective. Next difference is efficiency is chiefly a criterion of the inner life of the organization, and it is concerned with the economic and technical aspects of the organization. But effectiveness is extremely wide concept, as it considers the endurance prospects of the organization, which are determined exclusively by the efficiency of the interior system. Next difference is effectiveness considers organizational environment interface and also takes care of the human side of the organization. Efficiency on the other side focuses on the technological facet of the organization. Next difference is an effective organization is not essentially efficient, but an efficient organization is essentially effective. It is yet desirable that an effective organization is also an efficient one. Efficiency might assist an organization in becoming effective by escalating the possibilities of energy storage and by assisting in long-run growth and survival, but it is not a facet of organizational effectiveness. Next one is factors affecting organizational effectiveness. The diverse approaches embrace diverse standards for assessing organizational effectiveness. That is why a very significant and tough job for the manager who is examining the condition is to ascertain the factors underlying organizational effectiveness. The main set of factors or variables that possibly have their effect on effectiveness are organizational characteristics, environmental characteristics, manager policies and practices, employee characteristics. All these points and factors are explained as, first one is organizational characteristics. Organizational characteristics which affect the effectiveness are of two forms: organizational structure and technology. First is organizational structure. It affects the effectiveness in subsequent ways. Structure in terms of functional specialization, size, centralization of decision making, and even formalization is probable to rise productivity and efficiency. Next one is job satisfaction of the employee is also connected to the organizational structure. Impartial division of work and delegation of authority and responsibility and appropriate directions are probable to create the feeling of satisfaction amongst employee at work. Next organizational characteristic is technology. Technology and organizational structure are interconnected. The kind of technology defines the nature and structure of the organization. Alteration of technology will need many changes in the organization in the method of like alteration in the operation, such as from labor intensive to capital intensive, shifting of employees to either diverse action inside the similar factory or to other factory of the organization, modification in the span of control, forming of new and winding up of new departments, alteration in the materials which are used, re-education and provision of more knowledge about the newest technology to the employees. If the organization flops to alter the structure as per the needs of technology, it will never prove to be effective. Next factor affecting organizational effectiveness is environmental characteristics. Each organization needs an appropriate management information system which will observe such variations in the environmental settings which have a bearing on organizational structure. There are set of factors which decide the appropriateness of organizational reaction to environmental changes. These factors are: first one is the correctness with which environmental conditions are projected, precise perception of environmental states, practicality enshrined in the organization system. Management can obtain information about the environmental factors from its economic research division, research development department, management advisor or legal advisor, etc. These are specialists who will recommend any amendment which are to be made in the organizational setup to conform the environmental changes. The environmental factors which affect the organization are of two forms. First one is external environment, second one is internal environment. Under external environment, it entails of the largely market, legal and technical facets which have a straight bearing on supply of materials and other factors of production as well as the distribution of finished goods. The external environment is considered by intricacy, uncertainty and ambiguity. Second environmental is internal environment. The internal environment of the organization is intensely influenced by psychosociological factors which decide individual reactions to the organizational expectations. If the employee gives suitable and proper reaction to the program policies undertaken by the organization would be effective, otherwise not. The reactions of the employees would depend upon the synchronization prevailing amongst the members and the consistency in the perception of individuals and the organization. Next factor affecting organizational effectiveness is employee characteristics. Human factor is the utmost vital factor which affects the goal attainment of the organization. If there is a close amalgamation amongst the individual and organization goals, the organization would be extremely effective as explained in the behavioral approach to the effectiveness. If the organization, without compromising with its essential programs and policies, might readapt to accommodate valid ambitions of the employees, it should do to attain effectiveness. In case there is a fight amid the individual and the group goals and the issue relates to the very presence of the organization would have to take strong stand to deal with the condition. To aid in attaining the effectiveness of the organization, the employees should have some features. For example, they should be fascinated towards and pleased with the organization. They should be dedicated towards the organization. Their motives, aims and needs should not be in conflict with the organizational aims. The employees should be capable and conversant. They should have their own role lucidity. The job turnover should be very low, if any. Next factor affecting organizational effectiveness is managerial policies and practices. Managerial policies and practices are the further most significant factors influencing the organizational effectiveness. These policies and practices comprise: number one, strategic goal setting. Goal setting is very tough course. Goals should be so designed that they carry employee sustenance. While setting the goals, the management should understand the work connecting to the accomplishment of goals so planned. If goals are set which are easily attainable, that will create laziness amongst the employees and they will take the work for granted. And on the other side, if goals are set in a way which are too hard to attain, then in this case, employees will find themselves in stressful situations which will demotivate them to proceed further. So such goals should not be fixed which are unachievable. Unachievable goals dishearten the employees, and effortlessly achievable goals make them idle and overconfident. So such goals should be set which develop the capability of the employees to the best level. Next managerial policies and practices is resource acquisition and utilization. The efficiency of the organization rests on the acquisition and utilization of resources. The main task of manager is to use the resources optimally. There should not be any wastage of resources. A capable manager would guess the necessities of resources and put them to practice in diverse departments in such a mean that every rupee and every human hour are effectively used. Efficiency in resource acquisition and utilization is linked to an appropriate control and feedback system which has to be arranged and designed by the management. This system would offer policy rules to regulate their action, relate them to organization goals and also to themselves in the event of deviance from the set course of action. Next managerial policies and practices, leadership and decision making. Decision making is a task of dynamic leadership. Leadership and decision making could go a long way in making the organization effective. An effective leader is the one whose decisions are focused towards attaining such organization goals which are acknowledged and executed by the organization employees. The success of leader will rest on his style, his capability and the behavior of subordinates. Next managerial policy and practices is performance environment. Such practices should be executed by the management which outcomes in enhancing the quality of the performance of individual which would eventually be reflected in organizational effectiveness. A few of the practices like appropriate employee selection and placement process, employee training and development, planning of jobs for employee, keeping in view the resources obtainable and training needed by the employees, performance management and reward system. If the manager in the organization are adaptive and inventive and welcome new thoughts, the organization adaptableness to the fluctuating environment would be higher. Healthy collaboration can be there with the environment and the organization, and sometimes inner change could also be made to encounter the necessities of the environment. All this would improve the effectiveness of the organization. In addition to above mentioned factors which affect the effectiveness, Likert has recognized three variables which are valuable in defining effectiveness over a period of a time. These variables are, first one is causal variables. These factors affect the course of developments inside the organization. These variables are the autonomous variables which are in the control of organization and its management. These contain management strategies, policies, structures, styles, skills, procedure, etc. Next variable is intervening variables. Causal variables such as leadership style and behavior affect the intervening variable, which are those variables which characterize the inner state of the organization. Intervening variables comprise facets like commitment to the organizational aims, morale and motivation of employees, decision making and problem resolving skills, communication and group cohesiveness, etc. Third variable is end result, or we can say output variables. These variables replicate the end result of the organization, which could be accomplishments like failure or success. Output could be assessed in terms of production, sales, profit, etc. The above mentioned set of variables are interconnected with each other. The causal variables affect the intervening variables that in turn affect the output variables. The organizations which are anxious with the short-term outcomes only sometimes tend to oversee intervening variables. But organizations with a long-term standpoint give importance and appreciation to develop and build the intervening variables. If the intervening variables are overlooked, there will be negative impact on the output, but this impact would be instant. There would be a time lag before the effect is reflected in the output. Now there is one more thing, like how effectiveness can be achieved through adaptive coping style. The more effective organizations are those which magnificently adjust structure, technology and policies with the fluctuating environment to ease the goal achievement. According to author Swain, he recommended that upkeep of effectiveness made thinkable through adaptive coping style. According to him, the sequence of activities processes which begins with some change in some part of the internal or external environment and end with more adaptive dynamic equilibrium for dealing with change. Adaptive coping style is incessant process. There are 6 phases in this style. First one is sensing of change. The first elementary stage in the cycle is the sensing of change in some part of the interior and exterior environment. Failure to recognize change in the environment or wrongly recognizing the changes is the main factor for the failure of organization to handle with environment. The organization should have efficient management information system for effectively managing with the environment. Next coping style is importing the relevant information. The second stage in the cycle is the import of the pertinent information about the change into those portions of the organization that could act upon it. Though it is very tough to decide which inputs are to be taken from the environment and the organization fail to identify the pertinent inputs, mostly the information. Next point is changing conversion process. Inputs are taken by the organization from the environment for further handling. This is termed as the conversion process. The conversion process should be adapted as per the environmental necessities as specified by the information. Next point is stabilizing internal changes. The fourth stage of the cycle is to soothe the internal changes, whereas taking care of undesired variations in connected system which have resulted from the desired changes. This is essential because each subsystem in the organization is reliant on others and change in one might affect others. Also put, this effect might be positive or negative. Next is exporting new outputs. When the interior change is recognized, the organization becomes in a situation to export new outputs which are in accord with the environmental requirements. Some diverse and additional attempts might be essential for exporting the new outputs. If the organization fails to embrace the new approaches, it might become unproductive. Next is obtaining feedback. The final stage in the cycle is the gaining of feedback on the results of the changes for further deducting of the state of the exterior environment and the degree of incorporation of the interior environment. This stage is very much linked with the first stage because the process of sensing might be the same. See, failure at any of these stages might result into ineffectiveness. An efficacious coping recommends that all of the stages must be successfully negotiated. Next are the main organizational conditions for effective coping. Number one is organization must have an appropriate communication system through which consistent and valid information might be passed. Then sufficient inner flexibility should be there so that changes could be brought and engrossed by the organization. Then organization coping needs amalgamations and commitment to the organization goals which offers readiness for change. There should be helpful interior climate which could upkeep good communication, decrease in inflexibility and stimulation of self-protection. So in this module, we have come to know that organizational effectiveness is the degree to which an organization has encountered its specified aims and objectives and how well it did in the whole process. There are many factors that play into organizational effectiveness. Organizational effectiveness largely depends on 4 factors: organizational characteristics, environmental characteristics, employee characteristics, and manager policies and practices. No single factors work all the time. There is an underlying theme to all of the factors that contribute the wholesome effectiveness and efficiencies of the organization. These factors can be modified to meet the specific needs of the employees and particular organization. The first essential step is to determine what motivational tools would really be effective in each specific condition. Some tools might work for some organization but not for others, and vice versa. Apart from the above mentioned factor, Shan recommended that upkeep of effectiveness made thinkable through the adaptive coping style. According to him, the sequence of activities process which begins with some change in some part of internal or external environment and end with more adaptive dynamic equilibrium for dealing with change. So, in this module, there are some significant points like organizational effectiveness is an inclusive approach. It covers all the organization. An organization is supposed to be effective if it is capable to attain its objective inside the constraints of restricted resources. Next is, there are many factors which contribute to attain effectiveness in the organization, and no single factor is stable for all kind of situations. All factors are interrelated with each other. Thank you.